So welcome everyone to the Arts Act Grant Scheme Funding Clinic. We're delighted to have you all here today. We are joined by Dr. Marianne Boal, who you see here on screen with me. Marianne is a well-known curator and writer in art and architecture, and she has written extensively on these subjects for the last 25 years and has curated over 50 exhibitions here in Ireland and in Northern Ireland. And most recently, she completed her PhD in social research at Atlantic Technological University Sligo, my own college, where I studied myself many years ago. Marianne has been delivering webinars and professional development workshops for Visual Arts Ireland for over 15 years. And these have focused on creative proposals, presenting work, writing about your practice and about public art. So Marianne is the most perfect person to be able to provide us with some insight into application writing. So in today's session, I will begin by providing an insight into the key aspects of the Arts Act Grant Scheme following its recent review. A big thank you to everyone that participated in our recent consultation sessions. Your feedback has been invaluable to the process. So we're very grateful for your time and we're very grateful for your time. Marianne then will focus generally on application writing, looking at the do's and don'ts, common pitfalls, and guidance on supporting documentation. So we will get started now. I'm just letting a few more people come through. Now, just move this over here. There you go. Now, so the Fingal Fingal County Council is committed to enhancing the cultural and artistic life of our county. The Arts Act Grant Scheme is designed to support individuals, community groups, and organisations engaged in arts and cultural activities in line with Section 6 of the 2003 Arts Act. As you may know, if you've read our guidelines, the Arts Act supports the stimulation of public interest in the arts, promotion of the knowledge and appreciation and practices of the arts, and the improvement of standards in the arts in Fingal. The objective of the Arts Act Grant Scheme, as managed by Fingal County Council Arts Office, is the promotion of the arts. So that's the encouraging artistic expression and participation in the arts, access to the arts, ensuring that the arts are accessible to all members of the community, and cultural development, so enhancing the cultural life of the county through diverse and inclusive artistic activities. So getting into the nitty-gritty straight away, what is the eligibility criteria for the Arts Act grant? It's firstly, residency and operations. So individuals and community groups must be residents or operate within Fingal. Activities by arts organisations must take place in Fingal and have significance to Fingal. Artistic merit. So we want to see you demonstrate the artistic merit and the potential impact of your project, event, or festival. And we also want to see evidence of previous work or experience in the arts. It's important to also showcase the capacity to plan and execute your proposed project, event, or festival. And publications must be of a creative writing nature. And then finally, compliance. All applications should align with the 2003 Arts Act, as previously shared, and they should consider and enable all communities to participate. What can be applied for under the Arts Act Grant Scheme? And this is a key area, I suppose, that we've been able to expand upon based on your feedback. So we're looking to support artist and creative practitioner fees. So that's your artist facilitators, your artists and curators, musicians, composers, directors, stage managers, costume designers, set designers, prop makers, sound and lighting technicians, and choreographers. So you can see it's quite expansive what we can cover there. Then workshop and creative collaboration costs. So fees for your arts facilitators or arts leaders and facilitators to engage with community groups around arts activities. And then professional fees for collaborative artistic projects, such as performances, exhibitions, multidisciplinary arts projects. The scheme will also cover materials and supplies. So that's your art supplies, such as paint, canvas, clay, etc. Props and costumes for your theatre, dance, and visual arts. This year as well, we really want to encourage you all to think about accessibility of your programs. So accessibility costs relate to hiring of sign language interpreters, providing audio description, captioning. Perhaps it could be creating a sensory quiet area. Documentation and archiving is another area that is covered. And so that's your photographer and videographer. And then finally, the scheme can cover equipment and venue hire directly related to artistic activities where it is no more than 10% of the awarded amount. Then moving on to what cannot be applied for under this scheme. So equipment and venue hire costs, again, where is in excess of 10% of the awarded amount. And that would also include equipment purchase as well. We do not cover equipment purchase. Administrative costs, this includes insurance costs. Bear with me, just want to admit someone there. Now, apologies. Insurance costs, employee wages or salaries, general administrative expenses such as website hosting, postage, stationery, office supplies, etc. are not covered under this scheme. Entertainment and hospitality and marketing. So it's your, and I think it's self-explanatory. It's food and drink for your events, marketing and advertising costs, including posters, flyers, public relations, etc. Capital and third-party grants are not covered under this scheme either. So your capital improvements, such as building renovations, infrastructure upgrades, and third-party grants, we mean funding that is redistributed to other individuals as a grant. That doesn't obviously apply to if you're paying for artist fees, etc. Non-artistic and commercial proposals. So this includes anything that is what we would consider as not artistic. So sports and heritage and recreational events, community festivals where there is no focus on the arts, or commercial ventures, and fundraising events. Finally, publications and historical projects where they are not of a creative writing focus, and commemorative events are unfortunately not covered under this scheme. However, if you have any concerns or queries about where you could potentially find funding for such projects, feel free to reach out to me, as there are other grants available. As previously mentioned, there's the festival grant scheme, and there's also the Heritage Offices grant scheme as well. Now, moving swiftly on. So funding drawdown, how do you receive your funding now if you are successful? Larger awards may be offered the option to draw down 50% of funding upon receipt of the decision. This is new. We have brought this in this year for the first time, and that is in direct response to your feedback as past recipients and new recipients. For smaller awards, my apologies. For smaller awards, it will remain the same as in previous years. Funding is drawn down once the post-event report and proof of expenditure has been submitted. This post-event report and proof of expenditure and evidence of acknowledgement of Fingal County Council must all be submitted through submit.com. Generally, what happens there is if you are successful in your application, you will be shared, a letter will be sent with acknowledging that, and then in quick succession, a specific link for you to access that post-event report form will be shared, and you can complete that there then. So the assessment criteria, what are we looking for when we are assessing your application? We are looking at the artistic quality, and you will see that actually it's quite repetitive. Everything is aligning to itself throughout the guidelines. So the artistic quality, so we're looking for innovation, creativity, and artistic merit in proposals. We also are looking at the track record and the experience of individual artists, community groups, arts organizations. The community impact is also a key area that we will be looking at. So what are the potential benefits to the Fingal community? How are you going to engage and ensure participation by Fingal residents? We'll be looking also at the feasibility, so a clear and realistic project plan and timeline. Your budget is detailed and justified. Finally, then, alignment with the Arts Act. So how is your proposed project, event, or festival going to promote and enhance or advance the objectives of the 2003 Arts Act grant? Now, how to apply. As some of you may have are aware or have as you've engaged previously, we encourage you to read the new guidelines carefully and to obviously apply online using submit.com. Be sure to prepare detailed information about your project, event, or festival. This includes your objectives, your event plan, and your timeline. Spend time looking at your budget, making sure that it's itemized and that you have very clearly let us know how much it is that you're seeking from us through the Arts Act grant scheme. And then obviously don't forget to upload the supporting documentation to demonstrate artistic quality and track record. So here's a sample budget that we've drafted to give you a sense of what it is that we mean when we mean an itemized or detailed budget. This year we have brought in some standard, budget lines to help provide some clarity, but there is also space for you to provide further detail below. There's extra columns available, or rows, I suppose, that are free, and you can edit as you wish. So first and foremost, the one and only that is a required item in the budget within Submit is the grant requested from the Arts Act grant scheme. So how much are you seeking from us to support your proposed project, event, or festival? Then we've also included some other prompts, I suppose, to give you a sense of what else is of value for us to know. So let's say, for example, here, you received funding from the Events Office through their Festival and Events Grant Scheme. You identify or share that figure with us so we know from the outset that you've also made an application to them. And there's an opportunity there, to say whether it's confirmed or not and to add any optional notes as you see fit. Another example there is Arts Council or Creative Ireland. You may have received funding from another source, and there's an opportunity there to share that with us. Sponsorship and fundraising. It could be a fundraising bingo night that you've done to support this your proposal. You can include that there. Estimated ticket sales is also important for us. I put 0 in this example, but you may have an estimated number of ticket sales that you envision having as part of your event. In-kind support is also very good for us to know as well. So if you, for example, are given free use of the local community hall, it's great to include a figure there because that gives us a sense of the broader kind of contributions being made by others within the county towards your project. And then finally, membership fees. Some of you may have membership fees that people pay on an annual basis, and that's of value for us to know. That's important information to be made available. Now, so then going into the budget breakdown, once again, we have a list of kind of prompts within the budget that are already entered in. And once again, there are vacant, empty rows below that where you can also add in your own line items as is appropriate for your project or event or festival. The only required area, again, in this instance, is the artist fees, because as you can appreciate, that's the priority of this award, is to ensure that our artists are being paid as part of the scheme. And that's to ensure as well that anything that we fund aligns with the Arts Council policy of paying the artist. If you want more detail on that, feel free to let me know and I'll happily share that with you. As there are some great prompts around what is the appropriate fee to pay an artist, depending on what the work is, if that's helpful for you to have. And again, materials and supplies. In this instance, I said there was 0 for this particular project, but you may find that you will need to purchase canvas or paint. That's your opportunity to include that there. Equipment hire. In this instance, it's for a community event. So I've detailed €1,000 towards lighting and sound and technician. Venue hire again. In this instance, it was provided in kind, as you saw in the income budget. Access services. So in this instance, as I've said that there will be an ISL interpreter here. and then promotion and marketing, so €200 towards posters, flyers, etc. As some of you may have realized, or as was discussed at one of our sessions, one of our consultation sessions, contingency is something that is best practice, and we encourage. And so I did include a contingency line within the budget of submit.com, and it's totally reasonable for you to include a figure in there in the event of unexpected costs. You can include that there as well. So just to give you a sense of that. Now, so supporting documentation. What is it that we need from you to support your application? So CVs and biographies for artists, partners, or collaborators is very important for us to see. Past marketing materials, reviews, and testimonials are also of value for us to see. Examples of previous work, photos, treatments, draft scores, etc. are also of value. This could relate to your artists who you have engaged to be a part of your proposed event, project or festival, and then letters of support and commitment. Marianne very kindly is going to be going into more detail into some of these areas, so I'm going to keep it quite light here, because her insight is going to be quite valuable in getting into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty there around some of those key items. So the deadline is Monday, 25th of November. Obviously, all applications have to be submitted through submit.com. It's very important that you do that going forward. One-to-one application support is still available with me, so feel free to reach out if you'd like to have a chat about your plans or any questions that you may have. I'm here as a support. And and so I flew through that very quickly, I know. But I mean, in fairness, a lot of this all of that information is within the guidelines. It was just an opportunity to talk through it a bit more, and it may spark some questions maybe in the Q&A segment later. And with that, I am going to hand over to Marianne, who's going to take it from here. And thank you.
Thanks very much, Sheila. Pleasure to be here today. So I just would like to take you through a whistle stop on sort of a guide to funding and applications and basing it specifically around the Arts Act funding for Fingal County Council. So we'll just go to the first slide there, please, Sheila. So just want to sort of talk about what I'm looking at today. And as I mentioned, whistle stop. So what I'm trying to do is cover quite a lot of material in quite a short space of time, and I would like you to be aware that you will have the recording to look back at and the slides to look back at. So just be very aware of that as well. That you don't need to take down any details that will be on the slides themselves. But we're just looking at overall. We're going to look at the resource of the local arts office, the Arts Act funding itself contextually, the idea of building your career through opportunities. Healthy habits of applying for funding and making a proposal, and then giving you proposal headings so that you get a sense of how to break down what you're planning, and then some mistakes or pitfalls in proposals. So just giving that overall sense of what we're going to look at. So, and on the next slide, I just talked very briefly about some of the headings from my own personal experience. I have quite a broad background in terms of writing, curating, lecturing, and strategy experience and public art. I've sat in panels and written public art briefs, and so a lot of it's in visual arts work, but also in facilitation and general proposal writing experience, so across disciplines as well. So just to give you a sense of quite a broad range of experience across a number of areas. And next slide. This is just an example of one of the exhibitions I would have curated, and it would have been very much a sort of a group exhibition working with a number of different stakeholders and artists. It was a collaborative project working with artists and architects for the Braid Art Centre in Ballymena, and I just think it's interesting to kind of give a sense of the kind of the final product for the exhibition and outreach events that would have been organised in that particular project. So getting into the material itself. So just to emphasise the importance of the local arts office. So I think in terms of funding for the Arts Council is obviously very important, but there's also the devolved funds to the County Council arts funds, and they are an excellent port of call for your funding. So your local arts office will be providing funding that's multidisciplinary and cross-art form. You've got a range of contexts that are being addressed in that. And this idea of the county-wide remit with collaborative connection and inter-county networking. So I think it's very important to make connections locally and build your practice and reputation in the immediate context. And that gives you the opportunity to build your practice further in the wider context. So it's a really important, not just stepping stone, but it's a really important area of focus. Next slide, please. So we'll just go straight on to the next one again. So just in terms of making proposals, so I'm giving you a little bit of a sort of a sense of how you go about applying for funding in general. And I think it's very important to keep a bit of a sense of what you're applying for. So you should conduct good research and keep, say, a logbook or notebook of your opportunities applied for and the proposals made. And I would say less is more. Better to apply well for three funding opportunities a year and to apply not so well for 8 to 10. So try and focus your work more carefully on that. If you're successful in securing a commission or a project, document its life and try and document the project as well as you can. The brief that was involved, what you set out to do, what your budget was, what the selection panel was, any feedback you got at the beginning. Did you get less money than you asked for? Did you get the money you asked for? Things like that. Talking about the collaboration that you worked with your group, what development of dialogue there is. Sometimes people, when they're successful with a project, they just get stuck in and they get going and they don't necessarily keep that sort of really detailed record of how the project was delivered. It's invaluable. Each project can build directly upon another, and the knowledge you have there, particularly if you're working in a community group context where other people might be making the application next time, you will be handing them a really useful appraisal of the project. Equally, if you're unsuccessful, document any feedback you get and apply the lessons learned to subsequent applications and proposals. Make sure your budget is adequately costed. You can have a straightforward, simple budget that has covered everything you need to, but you also need to make sure that it's fully costed. So if there's any major lines that you have within your budget, make sure that you are giving an accurate cost, because at your peril, you will be giving something that's not accurate. And if you're contacting the arts office in advance for further details, be professional, thank the person for their time, and also keep a document of any contact you've had with the arts office, both for yourself and for others you might be working with, just so you know what was that valuable insight you got when you asked that question. We don't necessarily think of writing down phone conversations. It's really, really helpful. If you've got some really good advice, write it down. Make sure you have it for again. Next slide. So the Arts Act funding is very straightforward to apply for. There's 9 pages of guidance and an appendix with conditions and tips, and that covers all aspects of the award. They're clear and well laid out, and they give you everything you need to make a good application. So the invitation's there. You've got a gift of everything you need, and it's up to you to make a good application. You have a deadline of just under a month, so you should be getting started. And I always say get started well in advance of the deadline. It takes all the stress out of application if you've got a good long lead-in time making an application. So try and do your future self a favour by getting started early. The other thing about the good lead-in is you might have collaborative partners, and you might want a letter confirming collaboration, and you have to allow for any delays in getting that letter, so it's not last minute trying to do that. The funding provides a valuable opportunity for artistic and creative costs directly related to delivery of the proposed project. So the eligible costs that Sheila's covered, but you just need to be aware of what funding's for and to apply appropriately for that. And if you're going to talk to Sheila in person or over the phone just before you submit your proposal, if there's any major questions you have, try and make sure you've done the legwork on your proposal before contacting the arts office for that help, because there's no point sort of coming and having a very general conversation, because most of that will be covered in this session. So try and have your ducks in a row before you would make contact for any future or additional help. Next slide. Very, very basic advice, but very good advice is to ensure you've read the guidelines and other information thoroughly. And before sending your application, check it over to ensure there are no mistakes, and then hand it over to somebody else to take a look at as well, or discuss it with them. I always ask to have sort of a practitioner and a non-practitioner. So it's worth asking somebody who's in the arts in some shape or form, check, does it make sense? It's also worth asking someone who isn't in the arts at all, maybe an accountant or somebody from a different profession completely who isn't used to looking at arts applications. Let them see, is there anything glaring that you haven't covered? Send only what you're asked to, not everything but the kitchen sink. It's better to show less and show strong material than to show too much and maybe lose the interest you've gained through your application. And make sure that you can professionally present your application. You might say, well, you're not submitting a hard copy application, but you can achieve that through online application as well, making sure it's clear, concise, without mistakes or typos, and well written. So clarity is key. So try and give that a good effort in your writing. Next slide. So CVs and biogs, just very simply, sometimes it's worth going back to this. We all need to, no matter how good our CV is, you should detail your recent experience first, document your track record as an artist or practitioner, include other work and experience if it's relevant to your practice and potentially your project, submit material that supports your application within your CV and your biog. Make sure you have that, and don't detract by including too much. And then to accompany your application, 5 high quality examples of past work or past projects is preferable to multiple examples that confuse or of lesser quality. So it's clarity. You're talking about a curated application. By that I mean something that's been very well thought out. It shows your best self, and something that you'd be confident handing over to the person to say, this is all about our group or my work, and this is all about it, and I want to see what you think, so that you're very confident with what you're giving. And then at least when you get your feedback afterwards, you can say, well, I gave the best application I could, and let's see what they made of it. So it's the best way to work at all times, and that's why I say less is more in terms of applications annually as well. Next slide. So sample headings for a CV, this can be quite hard, particularly an arts discipline CV. Just like, what are you going to cover? So different things that you would cover is obviously your name and your contact details, whatever education you have, particularly relevant to your practice, solo exhibitions or performances, group exhibitions or performances, collaborations that you've conducted in the past. If you're applying for a collaboration or as a community group, show what you've done in the past of this nature to really sell the project. Any awards you might have, any residencies you've conducted, a bibliography, and the bibliography would be people writing about your work, or potentially if you've done any writing yourself, your writing could go in here as well. Collections, if you're a visual artist and you're part of various collections, you could go into there, but also make reference to other relevant experience. This is very important. So if you've got teaching, workshops, volunteering, work with children, work with older people, work with communities, that's where all this material should go into as well. It should be within your CV, and then it gives a good overall sense. Say you've got 3 to 5 practitioners involved in a project, the assessment panel can see, okay, so we've got 3 people here who've worked with children before, and this project is working with children, and we can see they've got workshop experience, teaching experience, they've given talks, and it makes it very clear there's a good strength in that proposal, and it could have feasibility in terms of track record from the past. Okay, next slide. I've just included a couple of artists, a couple of biogs here. So the first one is for an Irish artist called Niamh O'Malley. And it's just, you can have a look through that yourselves at your when you're looking at the talk later. So it's really just to give a sense of where the artist is based and contact details, and then some information on the practice. So in this case, she's had lots of exhibitions, solo exhibitions and group exhibitions, and it's really just to show the pedigree of the artist in that sort of in that sort of capsule form. The next slide shows a group biography, and this is a a group of dance artists, and it's called the Body of Knowledge Project. So that's a collaborative project, and they're applying for, if they were applying for funding, you would have your group biography. So it's okay to have your individual biographies, and then you would also include the group biography to show how you're working together as a team. So again, it gives you a sense of these three artists working together, how they work together, and what the project was called, and further details as well. And on to the next slide. One of the other things that you can have within your application is a letter of support, and this is very relevant to the particular funding opportunity here. It's written by the chairperson or director of the community group, and it should outline briefly the plan for collaboration. So it's development and management, as well as the broad dates and timeline for the project. It should detail the shared interests and objectives of the community group and artist, and it should also discuss the artistic benefit of the proposal to the artist and the community group. And then the next slide shows you an example of the letter of support. Sometimes these letters of support can be a little bit of an unknown quantity. You're just saying, well, what goes into that? How do I write it? The first thing somebody wants to know when they're asked to write a letter of support is, well, what would you like to be contained in that? What do I need to talk about? What do I reference? So it's really helpful to have a sense of how you would write that. So this is somebody saying, dear, the Arts Act panel, I write to express my strong support for this proposal by the artist or the group submitted to the Arts Act funding scheme, titled, and then you put in your proposal title. I understand that the group or the people involved will pursue, and then you describe the project. So you have a sense of what it is that's going to be done and what the relevance is to this particular group. So this collaboration is important to us because, and then you insert your details on that. So you understand what is being proposed and you explain why it's important to you. So it's very important. It's just a sort of a cause and effect that you actually have fully understood what's being proposed and why you support it. So it's not rocket science, but it's worth putting it into context there because it's hard to write that succinctly. So, and then you would say, as the chairperson or director, I can assure you that this group will provide the resources necessary to facilitate the project, and specifically we've committed. So if there's anything that groups committed, but whether that be venue in kind or maybe workshop space in kind or documentation in kind, something like that, they can talk about how they're going to support it, and then say why they're supportive of it and how it's going to benefit the community and align with their visions and efforts, and then you would sign off. So it's a short letter, but once you put in your details, you would probably get this to be around a page. There's no need to go beyond the page. You can have a nice detailed page with some, two quite chunky paragraphs, and then give a sense of it overall. So you don't need to go on to say 2 full pages of this letter of support. Just try and keep it succinct as well. And on to the next slide. I wonder how I'm doing on time. Am I okay for time, Sheila, at the moment? Perfect, no problem. So just in terms of selection criteria, now Sheila's covered the selection criteria, but I just want to go into a wee bit more detail in terms of, sometimes you see that criteria and it's just quite useful to sort of see what it's sort of measured against. So the artistic quality would be measured against the track record and experience of the artist, and the innovation and artistic merit of the project, the event, the festival. And the community impact is going to be measured against the potential benefits to the Fingal community and the engagement and participation with Fingal residents. And then in terms of feasibility, you want to make sure that you're measuring that against a clear and realistic project plan and timeline, and that you've got a detailed and justified budget. And then the alignment with the Arts Act. How do you align with the Arts Act? You make sure that your proposal advances the objectives of the Act. So it sounds, when you see criteria and you see the Arts Act, you think, well, how does this all work? You just try and line up each of the elements, and then you can address each of the criteria. So if you keep in mind what you're measuring each of those against, and you detail that, you will have a clear proposal on how it supports the objectives of the Act. Next slide. So the criteria 1 in more detail is artistic quality and merits. This is very important in all local authority funding and in Arts Council funding. The artistic quality or merit is the key objective or the key criteria. It usually comes first in all projects because it needs to be of a sufficient quality to be funded. So it's a real kind of open and shut case. If you're not proposing a good quality project, you're unlikely to get funded. So you really need to be sure that both the practitioners you've involved, the groups you've involved, and the project that you've applied for is of sufficient quality and merit to justify an award or to justify funding. So you need to be sure that your projects, events and festivals demonstrate that artistic merit and potential impact. The applicant should provide evidence of previous work experience in the arts. Applicants must clearly demonstrate their capacity to plan and execute their project. This includes budget management, marketing and valuation. You need to know that you can actually deliver. And publications must be of creative writing nature. So also you need to be sure that you haven't sort of hit something that for some reason you can't be funded. So this idea of say an exhibition catalogue or historical archive or any self-publications, they won't qualify. On to the next slide. And then criteria 4, I've gone into criteria 4 in a bit more detail because sometimes you might say, well, how do I address the objectives of the Arts Act grant scheme? So the promotion of the arts, that's the focus on artistic expression and participation. So that's the quality side of things, and supporting artists producing quality work and work of deserving merit. Access to the arts, that's the community benefit and community access element. So you want to be sure that the arts are accessible to all members of the community. And cultural development, what's the long-term legacy of this project? What's it going to do after the curtains close or after the exhibition comes down? So it's going to enhance the cultural life of the county through diverse and inclusive artistic activities. So if you've done a project that's going to be remembered or it's going to have a bit of a lasting impact, it might lead to other projects, and that's something you can look out for as you're doing your own project, is what comes next? How can I develop this relationship with the Arts Office further? Is there any potential to do something nationally with this? Can we bring what we've done in Fingal further afield? Can we include the access side or the community benefit and actually get them involved in another project in Fingal? So all those sorts of things can all be your cultural development side of things as well. So it's encouraging artistic projects, events and festivals that are innovative, inclusive, accessible, and they meet the priorities of the Arts Plan in line with the Arts Act. So it's quite clear, but that's another way of looking at it as well. So next slide. Sheila's already covered this, so we'll skip on to the next slide as well. I'm just conscious of time, and I want to make sure we have time for a Q&A. So in terms of the proposal headings, this is quite self-explanatory what we have on the slide here, but just to kind of, it's very worthwhile writing your proposal in this format and then completing your application form. And you might think, well, I don't necessarily need all that for the application form, not all that's asked about. But if you have this material worked out as your group, you will have a much stronger application. So address all these headings, write your proposal in this detail, and then you will have a good sense of what you're applying for. Now, the summary statement, that's up to 3 sentences giving an overview of your proposal. That's really important when you've got all the different applications on the table of the panelists. They will be able to say, okay, there's that summary proposal. I can see that in a few sentences. It brings it back into their mind. This is what you proposed. So try, and whatever you put together, go back and write your summary statement and make that strong and give that kind of impact as to why it deserves support against the objectives of the Arts Act. So a little bit of critical thinking there at the end of your proposal to see how you're going to summarise it. Your concept, what are you applying for, what you want to do and why, what's the anticipated income. That's a couple hundred words initially to write it, but make sure you've gone through that in a bit of detail. What approach do you have, the vision for the project, how are you going to do it and who's involved. So really think about the what and the why and the how. And then your project plan. It's really helpful to have a table, sort of a time frame table, and whatever collaborative work's going on in there. Track record that shows and ensures successful delivery. Document your track record as individuals in a group. feasibility and past experience. Document that again, think about any potential complications, and a very basic risk assessment. So are there any elements of your project that might have a risk factor, and have you thought about how you would address those? Impact or enhancements of your work. So who will benefit? Who's benefited in the past from work you've done? Who's going to benefit from this project? Why is it important to the Fingal County Council audiences and communities? And then the public community or engagement. How do you plan to reach and engage the audience as well? And what are your plans to involve them too? And then the next slide just continues on. Just your budget, your spreadsheet or table. Now you'll have that in your application form, but just in very basic form, try and have that worked out in your proposal. Cost your time, include whatever supporting kind you have. Additional information, is this a continuation of previous group activity, your own work, is it new work? And then your practice or your group's work in the past, general background on that. And then the documentation, any documentation you're putting in, title everything with name, title, short description. If it's an artwork, materials, dimensions, year, and just give full details on your visuals as well. Next slide now. And then the budget. There's a couple of slides here on budget, and I think it's just helpful to have a little bit of guidance on budget. You've got your templates there from Síle at the beginning. They're very clear. It's just try, before you even go and start filling things out on those templates, write down everything you'll need in terms of professional time, materials, equipment, marketing. And some of this won't go into your actual funding application, but these kind of headings like website development, invitations, press, all this stuff, it can all be in an initial idea of the exhibition, and then you obviously are only going to be applying for what you can apply in your Arts Act funding. But it's no harm having as complete and detailed a budget as you can at the outset, just so that you have a sense of what everything's going to cost. Then write down your possibilities for income, how much you're going to apply for through the Arts Act funding. And then, like Síle said, you can have possibly sponsorship or other grants, and you can also have ticket sales and potential other avenues for funding. And then, is there any sales aspect for your project? That would be included there as well. So you need the two figures. This might sound very straightforward, but you need two figures of the income and expenditure to balance your budget. So if anything's included in the income, make sure it's included in the expenditure. And that's particularly relevant for in-kind support. So sometimes people put the in-kind support down, but they won't put a figure on it. And it's very important that it has a figure in both the income and the expenditure. So you need to make sure that they balance. And you would usually draft the expenditure first and then work out what your income needs to be from that and from where. And we'll go on to the next slide. And this is just important information for your own budgets. And I'm probably preaching to the converted here, but because you're used to working with budget as groups as well, but just make sure you cash flow your project. Is there a payment schedule? We know that there is. In some cases, you would get 50% up front for the bigger awards, or you would have to cash flow your whole project and claim back afterwards. So keep a profit and loss sheet as you're going through. So that's a record of the incoming and outgoing monies according to dates. And this is bearing in mind that you might have other project funds and other project budgets. So just make sure you've got very clear details of what you're doing for this particular project should you get your funding. Keep your own money separate from that of the project. If you're an individual applying for funding, and if you're a community group, try and have your specific project heading. So you could have a separate bank account, or on paper if you can't have a separate bank account. Keep receipts for everything, and remember to ask if VAT is included and at what percentage. And beware, if a project takes longer to realise than expected, there may be possible price increases. And make sure that you include contingency, so that's your financial cushion. So that's usually at around, in this case, I would say around 5%, and should be calculated on your subtotal figure. And cost your own time, and include this as the expenditure part of your budget. And Síle's very kindly offered to give you advice on the sort of amount that you could potentially pay the artists or those people involved in your project. So it's worthwhile finding that out in advance if you're in any way unsure about it. And always include support in kind in your budget. Even though money's not changing hands, it still counts as a form of income or sponsorship as well. And go to the next slide. I think we'll just leave. I think that's probably enough on budgets, and we'll skip on a little bit, Sheila. Okay, and we've covered support in kind and what that is. And then this is just to finalize in terms of, pitfalls of proposals. Sometimes people say, oh, I thought I had everything in that I needed to have. So just make sure you haven't submitted an incomplete submission. Refer to the checklist or include a cover letter to detail contents. Even if that cover letter doesn't get sent through the submit.com, you can still have that as your sort of as your checklist. You need to make sure that your proposal's convincing, because if it's unconvincing or hasn't been properly thought out, it won't be fundable. It has to be feasible to be fundable. So it's very important to bear that in mind. The concept could be undeveloped and lacks detail, to make sure you've dealt with everything fully. And I think sometimes the idea of a timeline or a timetable for delivery is really helpful in this regard, because it can give both the panel confidence and it also gives you reassurance that you know how to manage your project and what dates you have on it as you deliver. Maybe the concept's not connecting with the proposed context. Maybe it's not relevant enough to Fingal County Council. So make sure you've got enough of a connection with your local area that you're applying for. Are you submitting of more than one idea? And if you are, certainly don't do more than two. Make sure each concept's clear. I would say focus on one project, focus on it well. Sometimes people just cannot decide, I would like to do this or this, and they just can't decide between one or the other. So make sure both your concepts are clear if you're submitting more than one idea. Make sure you have a complete budget. You need to be sure that everything is dealt with and both sides are balancing. The concept could lack originality or be too similar to previous work by your group or by you as an artist. And make sure it's not commercial. It's not some sort of money-making venture that has too much of a sort of a focus on that and not enough on the community benefit. And if you're writing your CVs and your biographies, make sure that they're clear and concise, not exaggerated, and written in the third person for your biographies as well. So it just gives good clarity for that. So I think that's everything. And if you want to take up the opportunity of one-to-one session with the Arts Office, it's important that you would prepare before that and make sure you've read through the guidelines and draft any questions you have, and be sure to have at least a draft proposal ready to discuss, and ideally a draft budget as well, just so that you've given that some thought, and ensure you've all items ready for your application, your CVs, your biogs, your visuals, and an art statement or a group community group statement as well for the project.
Great. Thank you so much, Marianne. It's an hour is very short for so much information. So thank you. It's very hard, but thank you. And that was really informative. And actually your proposal breakdown, I think, is invaluable, because that's answering all your who, what, where, when, and why. That's everything that's in the application form. But sometimes just having it in one place, can be really helpful. And then it's a case of just filling in the gaps within the application form. So that's a really nice tip.